Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch and Learn Online. This is TFL librarian Sharon, and thank you so much for joining me today. Our topic today is Microsoft Excel functions and formulas, building on our workshop last week that introduced the basics of Excel. As a quick recap, Microsoft Excel is an electronic spreadsheet program. In other words, Excel is a computer program used for storing, organizing, and manipulating information. As I mentioned last time, I'm using the 2016 edition of Microsoft Excel. For today's workshop, I'm assuming you're already comfortable with the basics of Excel, such as the differences between rows, columns, and cells. If you're not, don't worry, but you may want to watch last week's video before this one. Now, Excel's functions and formulas are part of what really set Excel apart from paper spreadsheets. They allow you to complete calculations within your worksheet. No need for a separate calculator. Functions and formulas can range from the simple to the very complex, and while we'll go over some of the most common, there are far more than we could go over in a single class. Let's start with functions. In Excel, a function is a predefined formula that performs calculations using specific values in a particular order. In other words, it's like a pre-written math problem. You can, of course, write your own formulas, but functions can save us time when it comes to common types of equations, say adding or calculating an average. To add a function to our worksheet, we're going to look for the Excel formula bar on the top of the Excel worksheet, but below the ribbon, right here. Next to this bar, you'll see the cancel symbol, this little X, the enter symbol, the check mark, and the insert function button with the symbol FX. As you can see on my screen, I've prepared a simple budget to use as an example. To get started, let's try adding together all our budgeted amounts as well as our actual totals. Doing so will give me a grand total for my budget as well as a grand total for my actual amounts spent. To begin, I'm going to select the cell where I want the result of my formula to appear. In this case, I'm going to use row 6 as my totals line. And to get a total of the amounts I've budgeted, I'm going to put it in C6 here, right in column C, row 6. Next, I'm going to go up to the formula bar and click on that Insert Function button. You'll see once I did so that the Insert Function window has appeared. Now, from here, we can ask Excel to perform different types of calculations for us. We're going to start with sum, which, as the name suggests, will add together the contents of whatever cells we select. So in this case, sum is already highlighted. If it wasn't, you'd want to select it so that the word sum appears highlighted in blue. Next, we'll click the OK button. Now you'll see here, Excel is pretty good at guessing what I might want to do. In this case, it's saying, would you like to add together everything in cells C2 all the way down through C5? That's exactly what I wanted. If it wasn't what I wanted, I could type over what appears here, or I could use this button on the side to select and highlight the cells that I'd like to add together. You'll notice that we haven't listed every cell. For example, we haven't listed C3 and C4. The purpose of the colon here, though, is to indicate that C2 is the starting cell and C5 is the final cell, and that we're adding together everything in between. If you're unsure what's being added together, Excel also tries to give you a hint here on the side. For example, it's listing out all the numbers contained within those cells that I'll be adding together with my sum function. Once my formula looks correct, I can click the OK button. And there we go, my total amount budgeted has appeared in cell C6. If I look up at the formula bar now, I'll see the cell names, starting with C2 and ending with C5, preceded by the word sum. Now, as you'll notice from my formula bar, I've used the cell names rather than the contents of the cells, and there's an important reason for that. If I use the names of cells rather than just their contents, Excel can automatically recalculate if my numbers happen to change. For example, perhaps I know that my electricity bill is going to increase and I'm going to increase my budgeted amount accordingly. There we go. I did not have to do a new formula. There you go. Rather than creating a new function, Excel simply recalculated the total with my new amounts. Paper spreadsheets can't do that. Now, let's say I'd like to do the same thing in column D here. So D6. Now, I could repeat that same process, going through the insert function option, choosing the sum function, selecting the cells I want to add together, all of that. But Excel's pretty smart, and it is capable of doing what's called flash fill. In other words, Excel can, based on our previous actions, guess at what we're trying to accomplish. So if I highlight cell C6, move my cursor to the bottom right corner, hold my left mouse button down, and pull so that both cells C6 and D6 are highlighted. Okay? Then I'm going to let go of my mouse button. Oh ho ho! So something's filled in D6, but we have a problem. And this is perfect because this is a really common thing to happen that you're going to want to know how to troubleshoot. If you see the pound symbol repeated like this over and over again, I had someone in an Excel class tell me they look like train tracks, so that's now all I can see. What it means is that your cell is too narrow to accommodate the full number. Remember from last week, we can resize the cell either by pulling between columns D and E, or simply by double-clicking on the line. And ta-da! There, the train tracks have disappeared and my number is now visible. If I highlight cell D6, you'll notice that my function appears the same. It's sum with, instead of C2 to C5, it's been replaced with D2 to D5. Again, I didn't have to type this out. Excel was smart enough to figure out that I was going to want to do the same type of calculation in the neighboring cell. Now, there are a couple of other functions I want to show you, but before we do that, let's take a few minutes to talk about writing your own formulas. Pre-made functions are great when they meet our needs, but sometimes we need something specific. Take the sum function we've been working with, for example. The sum function is wonderful if we only need addition, but life is rarely so simple and budgets are never so. Looking at our budget, as an example, we'll need to be able to do subtraction and maybe even multiplication and division as well. Just like with our sum function though, we can start by selecting the cell where we want the results of our formula to appear. Just like with our sum function, we're going to start by selecting the cell where we want the result of our formula to appear. In this case, I'm going to start with cell F2 because I want to calculate the difference between the amounts I budgeted and the actual amounts I've paid. Next, we're going to begin with the equal sign. This is so that Excel knows that we're typing a function and not just any other text. If we wanted, we can indicate that we would like Excel to perform subtraction using the minus sign, division by using the backslash, and multiplication by using the letter X. In my case, I'm going to be using subtraction, so I'm going to select first cell C2, and I'm going to say C2 minus D2 is the amount I've overspent on my electricity bill. When I'm ready to complete my equation and have Excel do the calculation, I can either press the Enter button on my keyboard or this checkmark button here. Okay, there we go. And you'll notice that my amount is held within brackets. That's because it's a negative number. Something to keep in mind when writing your own formulas is that Excel will perform the function using the order of operations. Do keep that in mind and use brackets as needed. As with the sum function, I could repeat my same calculation over and over, or I could use flash fill and, holding my left mouse button down and pulling down through all the amount over cells, F3, F4, and F5, I'm going to let go, and there it is. It's going to complete my calculations. One other thing to keep in mind is that if it's easier, you can start with a function and then add additional calculations as needed. Let's take my budget field here just as an example. In this case, I already have the sum function, but if I wanted, I could add additional equations to my formula. There's nothing stopping me from doing both. For the sake of my budget calculations, though, I'm going to undo this so everything stays nice and consistent. Okay, next up is the if function, which lets you make comparisons between a value and what you expect. For example, in a budget, we could use it to tell at a glance whether we're within budget or over budget on a particular line. Now, an if statement can only have two results. Either it's true or it's false. Once again, let's click on the Insert Function button and scroll down until we see the if function. Then we'll click OK. If the result is true, we want it to return the statement within budget. If it's false, we want it to return the statement over budget. Once we're ready, we're going to click the OK button. As you can see, our status is listed now as over budget, which is correct because we're $200 over budget on our electricity bill. Once again, we could use the if function all the way down the E column, or I can use flash fill and save myself a little time. Okay, that's almost our time for today, but before I let you go, I wanted to highlight a couple of places that you can find additional information about Excel. We haven't even scratched the surface of functions and formulas today, but if this interests you, you may want to check out the Microsoft Support website and the free courses available with your library card through Universal Class. All right, to recap, today we learned how to customize our formulas to suit our mathematical needs and how to use the sum and if functions. Next week, we'll be taking a look at pivot tables, so I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for your time and have a great day.